Ninjago has plot holes, and I think that kind of goes without saying. It's a TV show, and unfortunately, you can't be perfect 100% of the time. But in a strange way, I really like them, because it offers an interesting way to give a solution to something that may have not have actually been considered within the show. It could give an extra layer of lore to something that may not have had it in the first place, and for that reason, I really do like them. And I've covered Ninjago plot holes twice now on this channel, and you guys really enjoy them, so I wanted to provide some more and try to give explanations to these issues within the show itself. And honestly, I just think it's a really fun little concept, and I love to see what you guys think of these solutions, because it is always going to be down to interpretation. So I am going to cover 5 more that we have not covered yet on the channel, and like I said, I would like to know what you think. And of course, if you have any plot holes that I haven't yet discussed in these videos, please leave them in the comments down below, because I would love to discuss and try to resolve them with you guys, because the more meaning and the more lore we give to the show, the better. But yeah, let's talk about some Ninjago plot holes. The first one is actually coming from the pilot, and it's honestly really weird that I never thought about this before, but we actually get to see the scene where Samukai goes towards 4 weapons in search of the map for the golden weapons, and it's assumed that Garmadon told Samukai where to go for the map. But how did Samukai or Garmadon know about the map to begin with? It gets established that after Wu had his battle with Garmadon, he hid away the weapons and he made the map and he gave it to Kai's father. And the thing is that there is no theoretical way for Garmadon to actually know that knowledge without him of seeing it or somehow knowing it beforehand. But there's no reason for Wu to tell Garmadon where the very weapons he's trying to hide from him would actually be found. And the more you think about it, the more it makes little sense, because there is actually no explanation as to how they knew where the map was. So by all accounts, it is a plot hole, because it is random knowledge that Garmadon seems to know for no determinable reason. But I do have an idea on how he could have done it. Or more specifically 2, but both of these explanations actually rely on Garmadon having some way of finding out where the map actually was. The first one, or more specifically the less likely one to me, is that Garmadon uses the same form of meditation that Wu uses to foresee the future. We saw that a lot in the earlier seasons, Wu meditating on what was to come next, and it is by all account possible that Garmadon has the exact same techniques known to himself. So Garmadon uses this form of meditation to find out where eventually the Skulkin would end up to be able to find the golden weapons, or look forward to see where the Skulkin would go to look for the map, and that is how Garmadon found out the location of the map itself. Honestly, it's a very loose explanation and really does rely on a lot of really weird things, but it is by all account possible, because it would be really interesting if Wu knew that meditation aspect and Garmadon never did. The second explanation, or the one that I personally prefer, is the idea that when Garmadon went down to the underworld, of course, he immediately took control of the Skulkin army because he defeated Samukai. So he had the entire skeleton army at his disposal, and it would make sense to believe that Garmadon would predict that Wu would hide away the weapons and make some sort of indication on where they would be. Of course, he knows his brother fairly well, so it makes logical sense that he would assume this to be the case. So what if he sent skeletons to stalk or look at Wu as he was doing all of these tasks, and that is how he figured out the location of the map? It would make complete sense to believe that Garmadon would essentially want to keep tabs on Wu. Of course, he has the golden weapons, and like I said, he would assume that Wu would do something about it, so the skeletons finding out the location of the map would just be a surefire way of having Samukai be able to find all of the golden weapons. I personally do like this explanation, and it does clear up things for the most part for me. It still leaves a little bit to be thought about, but on an overall, I do think it is what makes most sense given the context. Because otherwise, simply put, what was the point of the map, or what was the point of hiding it? Because if Garmadon just knew, then why would Wu even bother trying to hide it? So there has to be some sort of explanation, and personally speaking, I do like the idea that Garmadon was keeping tabs on Wu, because it is completely within Garmadon's character. But yeah, that's the first plot hole and my explanation for it. The second plot hole for today also is actually coming from the Skulkin, but in a very different way. Of course, we get to see the scene where Zane is having his memories turned off by his father, and by all accounts, that was it when it came to Dr. Julian. However, in the season afterwards, it is retconned to where he was actually brought back to life by Samukai to actually make the Skulkin vehicles. But the thing is that Zane has absolutely no recollections of this, even though by all accounts he should have. In the flashback flashback in TikTok, we see his switch turned off, and then Zane immediately looks to the side and he shuts the panel closed. However, in season 2, Zane is just stood there for about 5 minutes or so while they have their conversation, and the thing is that by all accounts Dr. Julian was alive by that point onwards, but again, in Zane's account, he was still dead on the bed. So you have to consider what is actually the case here. I guess yes, technically it's just a retcon, but by all accounts it is just simply put a plot hole, and there is actually a very weird technicality that you could consider that would actually fix things up. Now let's consider it as Zane's account of it from season 1 actually still being the case, but from Zane's perspective. Zane, by all accounts, the switch went off and the next thing Zane knew, he was looking off to the side with his father on the bed. However, what if in this course of events, we actually had Samukai tell Dr. Julian to erase Zane's memories from that little point in time where they were there, and then he would essentially have to fake his death until Zane actually left the building. Honestly, again, very loose, but it's the only way you could look at it in a different light. It would make complete sense that Dr. Julian just simply didn't want Zane to know about that entire interaction, and so would Samukai. So, if Dr. Julian simply just erased his memories from the last few minutes and then just played dead until Zane left, it would make complete sense considering it, because how else would it actually be able to be the case? The only other explanation I could theoretically give is that when the memory switch was flipped, Zane essentially needed to go into some sort of rebooted mode. Zane would have to reprocess and reset himself almost like a computer, and it would take a few minutes, and that is where the Samukai conversation took place. However, that still doesn't explain why Dr. Julian was still dead on the bed. It could still be the case if he was faking his death, but on an overall, it doesn't really make too much sense considering everything that happened. So for this plot hole, I personally believe Dr. Julian was erasing Zane's memories so Zane just wasn't the wiser to anything that took place, because Dr. Julian was also very clearly embarrassed by the fact that he did produce those vehicles, so it makes sense that he wouldn't want his son to know that it even happened. So again, it's a very loose explanation, but it's definitely one that I could see being the case, especially in the case of him. The third plot hole for today is actually coming from season 7, and it is to do with the fact that Ray and Maya, by all accounts, went completely missing, and Wu did nothing about it. It was established in season 7 that Ray and Maya were kidnapped by Crux, a fair few years before the events even of the pilot, and we do also know that they were good friends with Wu and Garmadon, so when they actually went missing, Wu basically by all accounts did nothing about it, because he never mentions the fact that he went to look for them or he was concerned about the fact they were missing. He acts as if they were dead, and of course that's because season 7 was the point in time where they decided their parents were still alive, but in context of the wider story, Wu by all accounts did nothing, and there's no explanation as to why. What goes even further into this is the fact that Wu most definitely knew Kai and Nia were around, and he doesn't really do anything about it, because in the pilots, they act like they didn't even know Wu, because Wu basically must have never have turned up between their kidnapping and when the pilots actually occurred, which honestly calls more into question, and of course, Kai and Nia's being left alone in a blacksmith shop is a whole nother plot hole in of itself, but the thing is that simply put, it is just one giant plot hole with no explanation. But there is some form of explanation in my opinion. The thing you can consider is the fact that Crux was very clearly planning out his whole scheme very much far in advance, and it makes sense that he did take into account that Ray and Maya, the two elemental masters of fire and water being missing, would be on Wu's radar. So what if Crux did consider this aspect by actually making a forged letter in the name of Ray and Maya and sent it off to Wu, detailing that they had to go away for some reason, that the kids were in safe hands, and that they wouldn't be able to be seen for a very long time, and Wu just simply bought it. He had no reason to believe that there was any reason for them to be kidnapped, or there was no reason to believe that there was something nefarious going on. He could have just seen it as Kai and Nia's parents just went away for a while, and the kids were completely fine, so don't worry about them, so he just simply never really bothered. Another way you could consider it is that Crux, again as part of his plan, faked the death of Ray and Maya, and again in similar vein, had some sort of story about the kids being taken care of by someone else, and again it wouldn't really concern Wu, because Wu before the events of season 7 does reference Kai and Nia's parents as if they have passed, so there is a reason to believe essentially that they may have just have passed away at some point, and Wu just believed that fact as well. This is honestly a very difficult one because it would have to rely on Wu being kind of negligent in a lot of different ways, but I do believe that Wu believing that they were dead by Ray and Maya's own quote-unquote words could be a passable explanation as to how Wu never actually went looking for them and why he was never concerned about their disappearance. Honestly, the fake death scenario makes more sense to me because there's no other way to see it. The fourth plot hole is one that may not be considered too much of a plot hole in a lot of different ways, but definitely feels unexplained nonetheless, and that is the whole case of Pythor within Season 3, and the whole fact that he is this cloaked, mysterious, secret identity until he gets revealed by his own accord. Why was he hiding his identity from the Overlord? I would completely understand why he's hiding his identity from the ninja, that makes complete sense to me, but the thing is that he was still maintaining this disguise in the Overlord's presence when no one else was around, to the point where, when Pythor does reveal himself, of course the Overlord makes a remark about finally figuring out who it was. But the thing is that there was no reason for Pythor to do that. The not-so-fun out-of-universe explanation is the fact that, of course, you could just say that they wanted to keep the Pythor reveal a secret. But the thing is that you could have still have said that Pythor was known to the Overlord beforehand. We have proof that the Overlord didn't know. So, it makes no sense, and it's really difficult to explain something like this. The only explanation I was able to come up with is that when Pythor was in this hooded state, he was also using this different modulated voice, and it was clearly to conceal himself, but I think it was for more than one reason, and that was because Pythor was clearly injured. When Pythor makes his initial reveal, you can hear that there's a lot of strain in his voice, and he also makes a remark about how the Devourer did quite a number on his skin complexion. But what if there was more done to him, and he was simply hiding that from everyone around him to make him not look so weak? When he was in this more hidden form, he was able to recover from whatever injuries he had without actually having it known that the great Pythor P. Tumsworth was actually in some sort of injured state, and he revealed at a very specific time because he officially felt recovered enough to be able to make more of an impact and live up to the legacy that he has set out for himself. Remember that Pythor is very much about himself, he's very much an egotist, and you can see that in most of the seasons that he's in, but the thing is that if he is seen in this more damaged, delicate state, he very clearly doesn't like that fact. It's also proven by the fact that when the Overlord's in a weakened state, he kind of relishes in the fact he's in that state as well, and when he was tiny in Season 4, you could also see how it affected his ego as well. So there's a lot of indications to show that Pythor very clearly cares about the state that people see him in, and takes advantage when someone isn't as in good condition. So it makes sense that he would have done something like this. So the whole ambiguous nature is rounded off to the fact that he is just trying to hide the fact that he was hurt. He's trying to hide the fact that he was weak, and he's trying to hide the fact that he was, simply put, not in a state that he wanted people to see him in. Because the other most notable example that really kind of proves that he was in some sort of injured state is that when he was in this hooded kind of figure motif, he also was in a completely different attacking style. He was purely ranged, he had a bow, but as soon as he reveals himself, he's back to close hand-to-hand combat, almost like he was recovered. So that is why I believe that he hid himself from everyone because he was hurt by the Devourer. It makes a lot of sense to me, and honestly kind of clears up one of the bigger mysteries for me when it comes to Rebooted. And the final one is a fairly infamous question, but I do officially think I have an explanation that makes a lot of sense, and it's the whole confusion of when Lloyd was truly born in relation to the rest of Ninjago. Lloyd's birth is honestly very ambiguous because of the nature of the events surrounding it, and the thing is that while it seems fairly clear in nature because we know how old he is as of the time of Season 1, it also doesn't make a lot of sense considering a lot of other factors. Around the time of Lloyd's birth, you would have had to have had the battle between brothers, you would have had to have had Wu and Garmadon age up, and you also would have had to consider the fact that a lot of other characters didn't age in the same way a lot of other people did. Remember, Ray and Maya looked identical when they were kidnapped in relation to when they were found in Season 7, which was before Lloyd was clearly born, because the ninja were also children. So, where was Lloyd actually born? Now I believe in its simplest form it's how old Lloyd is. Remember, there's a little bit of debate around how old he is in Season 1, but assume he's 8 to 10. Now assume at the highest he is 10 years old, which means the furthest away the battle between brothers could have been was probably about 11 years before. So you could assume that that is when the battle actually took place. but how does it explain everything else? How does it explain Wu's aging? How does it explain Garmadon being able to do everything that he did beforehand? And it literally comes down to the battle between brothers, and they kind of show it outright. At the end of the battle, Wu's kimono causes a lightning strike on Garmadon. It completely changes its form, and it completely explains away how Garmadon would have aged up in a quicker rate. However, how does it explain Wu? Well, when Garmadon falls down into the underworld, his first remark is, "I curse you, Wu." So, in similar vein to the kimono cursing Garmadon, Garmadon cursed Wu, and they both had the exact same age and effect, and it explains how they got so old within the span of about 10 years. This also goes on to explain how Rei and Maya look the exact same. It makes complete sense to believe that Wu and Garmadon could have remained young if they just simply didn't curse each other when during the battle between brothers. They both had this effect on each other, and it lasted in a very interesting way, and it explains why they don't look any older after this fact. They simply curse each other to be aged and look older, and now that's how they have to remain, because remember, they were clearly in their younger form for a very long time, so it makes sense to believe that this is how they simply had them to age up as they did. So in the simplest way, Lloyd's age is just kind of how it should be. There's no reason to believe that it would behave any other way. There's no reason to think that it would actually have any sort of outright effects. I know a lot of people attribute it to the dragon Oni blood within Lloyd, but the thing is that it has to be in the most binary sense, because not only does it have to explain, say, Rei and Maya, it also had to explain Misako, and Misako fits perfectly in with this entire explanation. But those are the 5 plot holes that I've tried to solve today. I think I really like most of them. I think they all actually make a lot of sense, and it does provide decent explanations in my opinion. But I would like to know what you guys think of these as well. Do you like these explanations? Do you disagree? Is there a detail you think I'm missing? I would love to start the conversation, because these plot holes are honestly really interesting, and it would be nice to have some sort of headcanon explanation when it does come down to it. But like I said at the start of the video, let me know if you have any plot holes you would like me to discuss and try to figure out an explanation for. I love these types of videos, and like I said, I think you guys do too. So if you want more, please let me know. But that is about it for today, you guys, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Okay,